It's February 1974. You are walking through the jungle on a small island in the Philippines, and you are a soldier in a war that ended 29 years ago. You don't know that. As far as you know, the war is still on. You are thin. Your uniform is held together by stitches you sewed yourself with thread pulled from your own pack. Your rifle is clean, spotless actually, because cleaning it is the one ritual that keeps you sane. You've been hiding in these hills since you were a young man. You are now 51 years old. A stranger appears, a Japanese college dropout in a t-shirt, carrying camping gear. He looks at you the way you'd look at a ghost. And he says the thing everyone has been trying to tell you for decades. The war is over. Japan lost. You can go home. You've heard this before. You've heard it from leaflets dropped out of planes. You've heard it from loudspeakers in the trees. You've read it in newspapers left behind for you to find. Seen it in photographs of your own family begging you to come out. And every single time you decided the same thing. It's a trick. This is the story of Hiroo Onoda. And it is not the story you think it is. Because the easy version, the one that gets passed around as a fun piece of trivia, the loyal soldier who didn't get the memo, that version skips the uncomfortable part. The part where loyalty stops being a virtue and starts being something much darker. Let's go back. December 1944. Japan is losing the Pacific War, though most Japanese soldiers don't know how badly. Onoda is an intelligence officer trained in guerrilla warfare, not the kind of soldier who charges a hill, but the kind who disappears into one. He's sent to Lubang Island with a specific mission: sabotage the harbor, destroy the airstrip, and hold out. And his commanding officer gives him an order that will define the rest of his life. You are forbidden to die by your own hand. You are forbidden to surrender. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but we will come back for you. Until then, you survive. Here's the thing about an order like that. It sounds like devotion. It's actually a trap made of words, because the officer who gave it walked away and went home. He grew old, he got a normal job, and the order just stayed behind like a landmine, ticking inside one man's head for 30 years. Within months, the Americans take the island. Most of the Japanese garrison is killed or surrenders, but Onoda slips into the mountains with 3 other men, and he does exactly what he was told. He holds out. Now this is where the comfortable story wants you to picture a lonely man waiting patiently in a cave. But that's not what holding out means. Holding out means staying at war. And a soldier at war does what soldiers do. Onoda and his men raided farms for food. They burned rice that villagers had harvested, because to him, that rice was feeding the enemy. They exchanged fire with local police who came looking for them. And over those 3 decades, the small war that existed only in Onoda's mind killed around 30 Filipino civilians, farmers, fishermen, people who had no idea they were enemy combatants in a conflict that the rest of the planet had already buried. This is the part the trivia leaves out. Onoda wasn't frozen in time, harmlessly waiting. He was fighting. The war was real. For the people on the receiving end of it, it was completely real. It just wasn't real anywhere else on Earth. And here's where it gets genuinely strange, because the world tried again and again to tell him. In 1945, leaflets rained down announcing the surrender. Onoda studied them and decided the wording was wrong, the tone was off, propaganda. In 1952, planes dropped letters and family photographs. He looked at the photos of his aging parents and concluded they were clever forgeries designed to lure him out. Search parties called his name through the trees. He assumed they were prisoners being forced to cooperate. Do you see what's happening? Every piece of evidence that the war was over, he reinterpreted as proof of how desperate the enemy was to capture him. And the more the truth knocked on the door, the more convinced he became that the door must stay shut. One by one, his companions fell away. One simply walked off and surrendered in 1949, choosing to rejoin the human race. Another was shot dead in a skirmish in 1954. The last and most loyal, a man named Kozuka, was killed by Filipino police in 1972, after 27 years of hiding. And suddenly Onoda was alone, the only soldier left in an army of one, in a war that existed nowhere but inside his skull. So why couldn't he just believe it? This is the question that makes the story worth telling, because the answer isn't stupidity. Onoda was intelligent, disciplined, meticulous. The answer is something far more human and far more uncomfortable, because you've done a smaller version of it yourself. When you build your entire identity on a single idea, the idea stops being something you believe and becomes something you are. And admitting it's wrong isn't like changing your mind. It feels like dying. For Onoda to accept the war was over, he would have to accept that 30 years of suffering had been for nothing. That the men who died beside him died for nothing. That the civilians he killed were not enemies, but just people. The truth wasn't just inconvenient, the truth was unbearable. So his mind did what minds do with unbearable things. It built a wall and called the wall loyalty. Which brings us back to that day in the jungle in 1974, and the college kid in the t-shirt. His name was Norio Suzuki, and he was a wanderer who'd told friends, half joking, that he was going to find 3 things: a wild panda, the abominable snowman, and Lieutenant Onoda in that order. He found the hardest one first, and when Onoda gave him the same answer he'd given everyone, "I will not surrender, I have my orders." Suzuki understood something the leaflets and loudspeakers never had. You couldn't argue Onoda out of his war with evidence. The evidence had never been the problem. The only thing that could end the war was the same thing that started it, an order. So that's what they got him. The Japanese government tracked down Onoda's old commanding officer, the man who, 3 decades earlier, had told him to hold out. He was now an elderly bookseller, living an ordinary life, having long forgotten the words that had quietly run a man's entire existence. They flew him to Lubang. He put on his old uniform one last time, and standing in the jungle, he formally relieved Hiroo Onoda of his duty. "The mission is over. You did well. You can stop now." And only then, only when the same authority that wound him up reached back and switched him off, did Onoda lower his rifle. He'd kept it in perfect working order for 30 years. He still had ammunition, hand grenades, his sword. He handed it all over, saluted, and wept. He went home to a Japan that no longer existed. The country he'd been defending had become something he didn't recognize. Peaceful, prosperous, neon-lit, uninterested in the warrior code he'd given everything to. He was a celebrity and a stranger at the same time. He eventually left to raise cattle in Brazil because the modern world felt more foreign to him than the jungle ever had. He'd missed the moon landing. He'd missed the entire second half of the 20th century. He came back into history as a man from a different one. So here's the question to sit with tonight. We tell Onoda's story like he's an oddity, a glitch, a man so out of step with reality it's almost funny. But look closer and the discomfort sets in, because his real failure wasn't refusing to surrender. It was being unable to imagine he might be wrong. Every new fact he bent to fit the war he already believed in. And if that instinct sounds foreign to you, I gently suggest you haven't been paying attention to your own mind. We all have an island. We all have a war we were handed by someone who walked away and forgot they handed it to us. A grudge, a story about who we are, a belief we'd rather defend to the death than admit we picked up by accident. And the leaflets fall. The evidence lands at our feet, and quietly, expertly, we decide it's a trick. Onoda spent 30 years guarding a post that no longer mattered, in a war no one else was fighting, waiting for permission to stop. He needed someone to come back and tell him the thing he couldn't tell himself. The hard part isn't holding the line. The hard part is knowing when the war is over, and being brave enough to lay the rifle down before someone has to come into the jungle and order you to.